Okay, I'm looking at slide 7, and a lot of it is review of what I just talked about. The proximity, the importance of proximity. That's that Festinger study I told you about with the dorm. One interesting thing is when we help somebody, it makes us like them. It makes us appreciate them because it makes us feel better. When we get an opportunity to help somebody, it's a mood enhancer, and so we associate that person with our positive mood. And if we, help them regularly, like by holding the door open for them, or regularly, I don't know, loaning them $1 or 5 cents or whatever it is because their dollar won't work in the machine or whatever. Those types of things make us like somebody more, and it can just be a one-time thing, and we'll like the person, or it can be a daily, on the daily you see this person, and eventually form a relationship just based on mutual help, because usually when someone helps someone else, they get reciprocated. So the feel good, do good phenomenon, I think, is what that's called. Like, you do something good and you feel good about it, and then you are associated positively with that person who you might have helped. Okay. And the familiarity, we talked about mere exposure, the rat study that I'm going to talk about, and the subliminal primes. They use characters, they use faces, they use words. By characters, I mean the Chinese characters that I mentioned before. Okay, as far as friendships go, not so much love, we're not there yet, but we like people who like us, and we're kind of really shallow about it. The more a person likes us, the more we like them. So literally, it's hard to kind of study something like that unless you do a longitudinal study or something. So experimentally, as far as showing, does, the number of positive things that someone says about you and the more they like you cause you to like them more, take strangers, put them in a laboratory situation, and then have the participant over here either 7 positive things about them or 8 positive things about them. And invariably, the people who had 8 positive things said about them gave a higher score of liking to the person who said 8 compared to 7 good things. And that's still a lot of good things. I mean, I can't think of 7 good things to say about anybody right now, even though I like a lot of people a whole lot. But we prefer the person who says 8. That's a very small difference, but we just have to make sure that we believe them. We have the self-serving bias. We're inclined to believe good things about ourselves. But on the other hand, if someone is obviously ingratiating us, that means, kissing our butt, they're kissing up to us. If they obviously want something, or they're trying to, get attention or something, then we don't like that, and we actually like that person less. So if you're going to try to attract somebody to be your friend or a relationship partner, make sure you say plenty of good things, but make sure it sounds sincere. So it has to be sincere. Another thing that we talked about earlier in the semester is that opposites do not attract. You've got those rare instances, and just like everything else, where there are exceptions to the rule. But on average, people don't like people with opposite attitudes. And that does not include heterosexual relationships. We're not talking about that kind of opposites. We're talking about opposite attitudes, opposite lifestyles, opposite religious preferences, those kinds of things. Another interesting thing is low self-esteem. It's related to people wanting affection. And there was a study where Elaine Hatfield did a lot of relationship research back in the day. She still does some. She's one of the first relationship researchers up in, I think, Minnesota, back when people thought, why study relationships? That's ridiculous. But we've learned so much, and there's so much more to learn. She experimentally lowered some women's self-esteem, and the way they usually do that is by telling them that their personalities are really awful, and the people that they think care about them don't really like them because of they got this result that looks really legitimate from a psychological test. It's all a lie, and they, temporarily lower their self-esteem, and then they debrief them at the end and tell them that wasn't really true. But in the meantime, they feel bad about themselves, and then they're given an opportunity to rate their likelihood of dating a person that they've just met. So the women's self-esteem was lowered. They felt bad about themselves. But then there was a guy in the room, and how likely would you be to date this guy? And they gave higher likelihood ratings when they had the lower self-esteem. I think this explains the rebound effect. You know, you feel like you've just been dumped, or you just broke up and you're feeling really bad, and you see somebody else, you're likely to jump on the bandwagon because you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I feel so bad about myself. This will make me feel good. Somebody else wants me. Yay. Anyway, you can think of your own examples, but just be aware of that self-esteem thing. Okay, so I've got a review slide here for you. Slide 9. What is the need to belong? You need to understand that that's a fundamental need. Psychologists have identified, Roy Baumeister, Mark Leary, I think it was 91, they determined that that was one of the most fundamental needs that people had, and the need for attachment, the need for closeness, the need to have somebody in our lives is up there with our other basic needs like food and shelter. Be familiar with that virtual frisbee game study and what that means as far as the physical pain. What's mere exposure? You know, so what's the definition? What are some studies that showed it, including the rat study that I'll tell you about in class? Why does it work? You know, what is it that's happening to us when we prefer the familiar? What are the limitations of it? I can tell you right now that if you don't like something to begin with, merely being exposed to it does not necessarily, over and over again especially, it does not necessarily make you like it more. It's only if you have a neutral attitude or slightly positive attitude, the mere exposure makes it better. Usually when you don't like something at the beginning, seeing it, being exposed to it more does not make you like it more. Okay, so how does proximity figure into the attraction process? It's sort of just like being in the right place at the right time. If you're a Match.com, you both happen to be at the same place at the same time on the same site. So, you know, it's sort of like a lucky accident. And propinquity means functional distance or functional closeness. So proximity is like physical closeness, like the dorm study where you literally run into someone physically. Propinquity means that even if you are not physically proximal, you are still, like in the Match.com study, you are, or example, you are still in the same place at the same time. Okay. Why are we attracted to people who are similar to us? When I didn't talk about the dissimilarity study, let's see if I can find that real quick. One of the things they say is even though we really like people who are like us because they confirm our self-views and our world views, and they make us feel just better in general about our lives, we actually, more than we like people who are like us, we dislike people who are different from us. And I can't find the study right now, but I'll try to talk about it in class, that dissimilarity actually repels, and that effect is even stronger than liking people who are like us. Partly it's because, if you think about it, we have that bias, the false consensus bias. We already assume that people are going to be like us. So we're not as impressed by similarity as we are turned off by dissimilarity. Okay, what are the effects of physical attractiveness on attraction? What is the stereotype? You know, what does it mean? And then what makes people attractive? Be familiar with all those different characteristics that we talked about. Excuse me. The gain-loss hypothesis. This is another interesting experiment. We like someone better if we gain their esteem. So initially, if we find out that they don't like us, we actually like it better if they initially don't like us and then they like us later. Like we've kind of won them over. We prefer that compared to if they liked us the same the whole time. And it's kind of weird because if you think the 7 versus 8 positive things, you think, well, if someone's consistently liking you, they should like you more. But in fact, there was an experiment in which, again, the people overheard a conversation. And initially, in one condition, the experimenter was talking to another participant, or supposed participant, a Confederate, about how they didn't really like the subject, you know, the person who was overhearing this conversation, and they thought they were kind of stuck up, or they thought they were going to be lame or whatever, and then after they interacted with them for a little while, they would go back and they again were overheard on purpose saying, wow, I really am impressed with this person. This person's really cool. They're way cooler than I thought they were going to be. They're way smarter, more interesting. And so as opposed to people who the whole time were told, oh yeah, this person's really smart, this person's great, I can't wait to interact with this person, who were consistently liked, the people were preferred who won the person over. The one who was won over is the person that we preferred. So it's like we've gained a fan. Ooh, and for that reason, we then like those people whose initial impressions of us were poor, but then they like us later because we feel like somehow we've won them over. Okay, now I want you to go ahead and you should write this down and bring it to class. How would you define love? As we move into the romantic relationship stuff, it's a very different ball game. We know a lot about attraction in general for friendship. We know a lot of important things about friendship. We didn't even talk about cross-sex friendship. There's a whole book on that that's pretty interesting. Called We're Just Good Friends. And what do we think? Can men and women truly be friends, just friends? And that sort of depends on your attachment and your beliefs about men and women and relationships and all that. But go ahead, and as we're moving towards love, how would you define it? What do you think is necessary? What is the component or the components that you think that make up love, and to consider yourself to be in love with somebody? So I'm talking about being in love as opposed to just loving someone, because not that that's any less, but you love your children, you love God, you love, you love your cat, whatever you love, but to be in love is a very different feeling. What's necessary for that? And then compare that to what do you think the components are that are present for you to like somebody? That is, just to, and I wouldn't even necessarily say only to like them as opposed to love them, but liking. Think about what liking is made of. What makes us like somebody compared to love? Okay, now on slide 12, we have a couple of different things. We have passionate love, which is basically passionate and companionate love. The idea there is that it's called the two-factor theory of emotion, and the idea is that there are several theories of love, but this one focuses on only passionate and companionate love, even though there are other theories that focus on way more. And as you look at the triangle, this is Sternberg's triangular theory of love, and if you you can see there are many more aspects of it, but one theory focuses only on two main aspects of love: passion and companionate. And so the theory of passionate love says that we need to have physiological arousal in order for us to feel passion for someone. And that's where the two-factor theory of emotion comes in. Schachter and Singer, the idea that we can misattribute our arousal to a person when we are scared or excited for some other reason. So we could mistakenly think that we're attracted to somebody in a different situation when it's based on something else. So the idea of two-factor theory is that you first have physiological arousal, and then you have a stimulus in your environment that you label your emotion based on the things in your environment. So if you feel fear, but you're not sure that it's fear yet, you feel the heartbeat beat pitter-pat, and then you decide, oh my gosh, there's a monster after me, I'm afraid. So you label that as fear. So the idea here is that you may feel physiological arousal around someone, and you could just be nervous, but if the conditions are right, if the person's attractive, if you're single, if a number of other things are falling into place right, you may label that as attraction, and over time that can be considered love. And there's a famous study called the Bridge Study that you guys should be familiar with. The book should talk about it in there. The idea was the scary bridge versus the sturdy bridge, and the men were crossing the bridge, and they were met by an attractive female experimenter who asked if they would complete a survey, and she gave the phone number and asked them to call her to complete the survey. And there's a scary bridge that was really rickety, and a bridge that was really sturdy and low to the ground, and everything else was the same. And the men who were on the rickety bridge were much more likely to call the woman and not only complete her survey, but ask her out on a date. So think about how the two-factor theory of emotion and misattribution of arousal comes into play here. What's going on? Why are these men who are crossing this scary bridge more likely to be attracted to this attractive woman? Okay. As far as gender and culture, I'm not going to get into that as much, but there are lots of fascinating things about, arranged marriages, how men versus women fall in love, men fall in love faster. There's all kinds of stuff that you don't need to know, but we can talk about in class. Bring your questions. Any questions that you have, I should be able to answer them with some scientific literature. So passionate love then involves physiological arousal. It's that feeling that you get when your heart goes pitter-pat, when you think about the person all the time, and when you think about the stereotypical being in love with somebody, and you're just obsessed with them almost. That's the passionate love. Companionate love, on the other hand, is when you have a deep friendship with someone, a deep, usually a much longer term relationship with someone. It doesn't mean that passion can't last, but passion tends to dissipate. It tends to decline. And there are tricks that you can use to maintain it, and we'll talk about those in class too if you want to. But the companionate love is usually longer lasting, and it's based on a deep connection and with someone with whom your life is deeply intertwined. So you have like a real, a much different kind of feeling about that person than you do with passion. You can have both in a relationship, and that's awesome. That's the consummate love. That's, if you look at the triangle, it's the intimacy plus passion, and then commitment. Commitment is your decision to stay in that relationship, and we are going to be calculating our commitment to our relationships in class as well. So look at that triangle carefully. That's Sternberg's triangular theory of love, and it does have in the middle, the ultimate love, the love that we would all love to have, intimacy, closeness, passion. So the intimacy is kind of like the companionate love. The passion, that is that arousal, sexually attracted, physically attracted, and then excited just to be with that person, and then commitment, so that you want to be with that person only. So if you look at the different combinations, romantic love, according to Sternberg, is a combination of intimacy, or he calls that liking, and passion. I don't know if that's enough of what liking is. I think liking is more complicated than that, but we'll talk about that too if you want to. And then fatuous love is passion and commitment. So I guess that's kind of like not friends with benefits, because friends is too intimate. That you basically just have a sexual relationship and it's ongoing, and that's fatuous love. And then companionate love, according to Sternberg, is intimacy and commitment. So there's no passion with that, but if you have that middle kind, the consummate love, it's the perfect kind of love. So then I want you to be familiar with the different kinds of love, but the biggest distinction is the two-factor theory, which talks about passionate and companionate. But do be familiar with those other combinations, and think about your own relationships and what you have experienced, and feel free to share goodies about those. Okay, I'm going to give you guys another break.